everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on biotechnology and genetic engineering. We have our world famous speaker, Madam Ali Rice, and Professor David Smith. First, I would like to give chance, Madam Ali Rice.
Okay. Well, as soon as I hear about genetic engineering and biotechnology, it makes me quite scared and a little bit. I think I'm quite cynical actually of its ramifications and the consequences of what happens. So I think it's probably because my knowledge isn't huge and substantial about it. But I know one of the key figures that I love is called David Suzuki, and he was a genetic engineer that basically pulled out of genetic engineering when he got to the stage that he didn't agree with the ethics that were involved. So I think there are big ethical questions about what happens, and and obviously across the board, it covers kind of nanotechnology and genetically modified crops, and so there's all kinds of dimensions to to the theme of today. So I think it's always, for me, it's always about kind of the ethical questions and whether we're having an impact on the natural world that's not necessarily a positive thing. And usually, as I think definitely with David Suzuki, his pull out from the genetic engineering was because of the consequences of the choices they were making. And I think that's the thing, is that you need to know the consequences and the impact of your actions. And I think even now we still don't know whether genetically modified, organisms or crops that we eat have kind of a long-term kind of effect on our health and welfare. And with vaccines and things like that, with the vaccines that they created for COVID, it's going to take time before people realize the impact or any side effects to that. So I think it's that kind of impact and long-term consequences that you don't know. So yeah, so for me, there's lots of question marks and alarm bells that come up. So that's my initial reaction to it.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. My questions to you: what is the primary goal of genetic engineering?
Well, Sharif, thank you so very, very much for having me on today. And apologize for being gone so long with South by Southwest and an international trip. I particularly like this topic, and Ali, right? You're so right. There are concerns that have to be there. But I got into this area very early. If you go back to 1999 with the last issue of Business Week before the new century, I was one of 6 futures they asked what this century be defined as. And I said it's going to be defined as the age of bio. Bio in a lot of many things: biotechnology, genetics, bio approaches to computing, bio approaches to software, tremendous advances in the life sciences and in medicine driven by advances in bio, regenerative healthcare, a whole lot of things which fall underneath this categories, Dr. Sharif, which is just so very, very exciting. The field, though, particularly in the biotechnology genetic industries, is very, very rapidly expanding. You see things like CRISPR, and CRISPR is now at Cas9, which is a revolutionary gene editing technology, and they're refining. The researchers and healthcare are refining its application from treating genetic disorders to actually helping enhance crop resiliency. You're seeing it used in precision medicine a lot. Tailoring medical treatments to individuals' genetic makeups is becoming more and more feasible. Personalized genomic therapy hold tremendous, tremendous promise for very targeted interventions and for improved patient outcomes. We're seeing this begin to become very true today in some very precision medicine approaches, for example, to cancer with immunology, which is genetically enhanced. You see that the genome sequencing technologies, which is one of the areas where I think Ali was talking about, has begun to change. And if I look, the cost of sequencing a human genome has gone down, but you see nanopore sequencing where millions of genomes will be sequenced that will help us begin to look at how we can provide new insights into health, into disease, and into things that are biologically based in all areas of our lives. We're seeing synthetic biology where we're designing now and editing entire genomes with a precision. And we're seeing this being applied to metabolic processes. Uh, One that I love because I am getting older every day is regenerative medicine, regenerative healthcare, where we're seeing innovations in tissue engineering, stem cell therapies, organ growth, organ transportation. They're transforming healthcare as we speak right now. So expect, I believe, very dramatic advances in the next 5 years in repairing damaged tissue and repairing organs. And of course, uh, biology is in and biotechnology is beginning to be used in all types of information technologies with biological computing, nano-based types of algorithms for artificial intelligence and others. You know, there's really exciting times ahead as we look at this, particularly as we see that the market valuation for just biotechnology by itself in 2023 was $1.6 trillion, and it's growing at about 14% a compound annual growth rate between now and the end of the decade. So, really, some very tremendous advances we see in biotechnology and genetic engineering. Yes, there's challenges, there's ethical concerns, there's moral concerns, there's regulatory concerns, but it's advancing very rapidly right now. So, Dr. Sharif, I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yes, thank you. Madam Ali Rice, my next questions to you. How does CRISP technology work and what are the applications of biotechnology? If you share some of the biotechnology applications, I think it will be good, helpful for
Okay.
our audience.
Okay. Well, so I think one of the people that I know actually is one of my son's best friends, as has what's it called? Oh no, it's got out of my head. He has what's it called when you need insulin? Oh, it's got it in my head. Basically, when I was researching it, they were talking about how they've figured out a way of dealing with. Hold on a minute, let me look at my notes. So that they can produce human insulin, and basically, he was diagnosed with what's the word? What's the name? David, help me. What's it called when you can't have sugar and anyway,
Diabetic.
diabetic. And this lad was diagnosed with diabetes when he was only 11 or 12. And what's really cool is he's got a monitor that's attached inside him somehow, and it reads his blood sugars and his and essentially he lives a full life, and he went to Cambodia, he could swim, he can, and he's got the reassurance of this monitor thing that's kind of within him and measures, all of the things so that he knows when he needs to be alert. And yeah, so I think the thing is that when you actually see people, in everyday life, he's just gone to university as well, but he has, a healthy lifestyle. And when he was first diagnosed, he came to a birthday party with my son, and his parents were very, very worried, and I think they were paddleboarding at the time. But I think the thing is, when you have a child that's diagnosed with something, and then you have to kind of modify behavior and kind of take certain steps to make sure they're okay. I think the thing is that technology is incredible and enables him to live an independent life, and he's very self-assured about what he can do. So I think for me, when you actually see things that are actually working and making life-changing kind of things happen to somebody, so that they can have a healthy, because that's, so I think the thing is, for me, that's reassuring. But I think like genetically modified crops, I would argue, because my brother-in-law works for Dow, which is a sister company to Monsanto, and for me, if you produce crops that you wouldn't feed your own children, there is an ethical question for why you're producing whatever you produce. So for me, I wouldn't produce anything that I wouldn't give my own kids. But I think some people would if there was so much poverty somewhere that if that food wasn't there, there'd be nothing. So there's kind of like there's always that kind of ethical moral question, and I think it is about food quality, or the genetics. There, it's in the research that I did, they were talking about producing animals and using genetic um, manipulation so that they got bigger cows, or so, and they were less kind of prone to disease. And it always worries me, as soon as you interfere with nature, I actually think it comes back to bite you on the bum, to be honest. So I think the thing is that there's consequences, and I think the thing is that on paper it probably sounds like a good idea, but in the long run it might not be. So for me, I think if you harness nature and do things so that it's kind of in kind of rhythm with nature, it makes much more sense than if you're engineering something that's going against the flow of how things should be. So for me, that's but obviously, it's amazing that you can kind of genetically identify diseases, and and make things different so that you can avoid people, either increase their welfare and their ability to live, or avoid people having, babies that are genetically prone to certain diseases. And so I think it's incredible what they can do, but there's always that question mark, so yeah.
Mhm. Thank you. My next questions to Professor David Smith. What are some ethical considerations associated with genetic engineering and biotechnology? Can you unmute, please?
Yeah, Dr. Sharif, that's a question that has applications in so many different domains and different answers in some of the domains you're in. As Ali said, let's just start with CRISPR a minute with it. It is a technology that lets scientists selectively modify the DNA of living organisms. And, we today, in almost every country in the world, we're already eating food that has been genetically modified by using CRISPR and a couple of other techniques like that. So, and oftentimes we don't realize it. So, there might need to be a place down the road where we go back and require notifications of that type of editing activity. But, as she said, it has applicability in genetic defects, spread of disease, and working with crops. But, it really goes in, and CRISPR, for example, uh, edits one of the proteins called CRISP in itself. It's called the CASS9 protein, and it's being used there. But you see some people who are considering using CRISPR and other genetic approaches to change the genomes of future generations. And, this is much like what you saw that under Adolf Hitler, Germany was trying to do, not with genetic manipulation, but through human manipulation of trying to create a super race. And so these technologies can be used for things like this. CRISPR could be used, for example, in a society to help do genetic editing where you want more male babies than female babies, where you want different characteristics to be used as you look at those in the different domains. Uh, you know, I I think it's, to me, very exciting when I look at how we can work to put these in places uh, where we can have the debate over what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Because the ethics, the values, our responsibilities are tremendous when you go there. And what we need to maybe ask, what are some of the permissible uses of CRISPR and how it can be used. You know, uh, policymakers, researchers, and society at large is beginning to deal with this question as we know it's being used more and more. You know, particularly with diseases that are life changing, life threatening. Uh, should there be restrictions on access to CRISPR therapies and technologies? Uh, how can we do this independent of social economic status or geographical location? Uh, you know, should we allow the base uh, germline be edited for purposes? You know, if we want to prevent the spread of genetic disease, that might be a good application. But if we want to talk about aesthetic or non-illness related reasons, should we be able to do that level of editing on it? You know, um, how do we do this on an international basis? And we should promote this type of technology on an international basis and regulate it on an international basis because it will be used globally. And how do we balance the safety and concerns and the privacy concerns and the risk concerns? You know, should parents be allowed to edit the genome of their young children or their young children even before they're born? And is it safe? And things. And there's a slippery slope on this. You know, we can begin to see this used in non-therapeutic areas and for non-therapeutic enhancements. And it's a right. We have to find that balance between it where a regulatory environment can be put in place that is applicable and being able to balance how the future benefits of this can weigh. So, as you know, Dr. Sharif, there's in many interesting bleeding edge technologies. It's that slippery slope going both directions.
Mhm. Thank you. My next question to Madam Alira is explain the process of cloning and its significance of biotechnology.
Yeah, because I think the cloning it's hard to get your head around, isn't it? Because obviously that they've got the same genetic information, but they're it's a new cell, isn't it? Because I've seen people that have had their dogs cloned so that they can have not the same dog, but that and obviously so in England there was as I remember, I can't remember the name of the sheep, but there was a sheep that was first cloned, and I can't even remember.
Dolly,
Yeah, I can't
Dolly.
remember how long ago was that, David? That's years ago,
God,
isn't it?
yeah, it's over
So
a decade.
yeah, so I think the thing is I'm not a scientist, so I don't really understand the implications of it. But I think it's quite cool. They're talking about bringing mammoths back, and I think that's kind of cool, really. So so I think so obviously it's down to I always feel like the industries kind of are going to keep advancing and pushing ahead regardless, and because there's no regulation in play that if the Western world doesn't do it, then China will probably do things like that already without anyone even knowing. So I think I think there's probably so much stuff that we don't know about that's already happened kind of behind closed doors. So yeah, and obviously the genetic information is incredible. I know people that have had their DNA tested so they know where their origin's from and what percentage of what they're from. And I know people that have had their dogs tested as well. So it's incredible what genetic information we carry. But for me, I think for me, one of the things that I truly believe is healing wise, our bodies are incredibly powerful at healing themselves. And I think we rely too much on intervention and don't really rely on natural therapy. And I also think our power of kind of intuition and our understanding, I don't think we've ever tapped into our true power really. So for me, I'd push for kind of alternative things that were much more about kind of it's our kind of innate power that we don't tap into for, you know, health reasons and well-being and even knowledge and understanding, you know. So I think the thing is that science is all well and good, but I don't know how much we, you know, that we, I know somebody that came to yoga and she was in her 80s, and just doing yoga gave her mobility back, and she got to the stage, you know, she got to the stage when she could barely walk from one side of her living room to another, and when she came to yoga, her mobility very gradually but definitely came back. So she would, you know, she got flexible and mobile, and you know, so I think the thing is that there's lots of natural things that are beneficial too, and I think, you know, for me, I'd always kind of err on the, you know, if I had to take therapy, I'd rather take natural therapists first than take any kind of pharmaceutical drug or, you know. So I think, and in the Western world, I truly believe that most people think that if your dog's ill or you're ill, the best place to go is to the doctors and just get some medicine. And I don't think, you know, I don't think you always need intervention. Sometimes you just need time to heal. And I think that, you know, that time in that body's natural immunity is really important. So yeah, I think sometimes we're a bit too reliant on popping pills. And so yeah, so for me, yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know enough about it and its kind of its applications to comment massively. Apart from, you know, from the research that I've done, there's massive, you know, it's development of animals and agriculture so that they're, you know, that they produce more meat, and you know, so it's, you know, it's kind of, I guess it's, yeah. And I've also seen, let's say, I've also seen, I think it's genetic modification of cells, so that they use something that's like a candy floss machine, and they can use real meat. This is quite interesting. They can use real meat cells to produce real synthetic meat that's made using the same proteins. So no animals die, which I think is quite cool, to be honest. So yeah, so I think, but I don't know whether I'd eat it because I don't eat meat anyway. But no, it's fascinating what they can do. So yeah, and they use this machine that works very much like a candy flush machine, so it gathers all the proteins together. So yeah, yeah, bizarre.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what are the GMOs created? How are GMOs created, and what are their potential benefit and risks?
Well, there's many different ways you can look at that because you see them being created in very laboratory type of examples, and is like Ali was talking about. There is some safety and efficacy things around that too. And you've got to begin to look at one of the challenges you see around that is how the embryonic uh, cells are put in place, and that's where most of the global debate has been around that. And you also begin to see uh, you need to begin to look at how the how you begin to look at it in the concept of human life, human plant life, how all those, and are the systems applicable there? Are they the same? And how do you quantify what they're doing? Because GMOs are, in addition to being called genetically engineered, they're also called bioengineered foods, and in many different ways. And some of the things is that GOM GMO crops can be designed to have the desirable traits. Like it can make apples or potatoes, for example, less likely to bruise, or same with bananas and things. And it can be used to enhance flavors, but there's no conclusive evidence of that today. Uh, Most people cannot distinguish between GMO and non-GMO foods. But the real benefits of GMO is they uh, have crops that can benefit farmers with they're resistant to some of the insects, so that it can reduce pesticide use. They're greater resistance to plant viruses, and this has a higher tolerance to herbicides, which makes weed control easier, for example. And they may withstand harsher climates like drought, heat, salty uh, soils, and like that. And some of the GMO modified food has extended shelf life. But there's also places where there can be enhancements to the nutrient value. There's a type of rice called golden rice that is engineered to provide a higher level of vitamin A. Uh, and while that's not very widely adopted right now, I think you're going to see more and more of that as it becomes harder to feed the growing population of the world. There's also some environmental concerns about the impact of GMOs on the ecosystems and biodiversity and how they might affect non-targeted other organisms in the world. And like in the United States, the Food and Drug Administration here has some rigorous regulations around GMO foods to ensure that they meet the safety requirements here, and that there's rigorous testing and certification that has to be happening for them to be sold to the public.
Mhm. Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, my next question is to what role does biotechnology play in medicine, particularly the development of pharmaceuticals?
Okay. Oh. Definitely the other day I was listening to this isn't I guess it's biotechnology, but they were using robotics to do general surgery locally actually, and I think it was a hospital in Colchester, and I guess it counts as biotechnology, doesn't it? Because and essentially they could do a much quicker operation with less surgeons required, and there was quicker recovery because of the nanotechnology that used all the anyway. So I think the thing is, and until you see things in action, you don't realize quite how much the advancement changes and how much more efficient and arguably safer surgery is if it's done in a in a really intricate way that because we've got kind of bigger hands that we can't do for that kind of precision. So, and I think pharmaceuticals is another thing that terrifies me because I think they're massive companies that make huge amounts of money, and I would say it's in their interest for people to be sick. So for me, as I have I have lots of queries over the pharmaceutical industry, to be honest. And I also think, going back to COVID, as far as I know, it's proven that the COVID was caused by a breakout from a lab that was in, I think, again, health and safety and kind of laboratory experiments. If something's unleashed this and biotech, the scariest thing is kind of like a biotech war on people, so that that they start releasing all kinds of viruses on populations to get rid of it. So I think that and the nanotechnology, I think that's in some of the conversations we've had in forums before, they were talking about nanotechnology that kind of could be on drones and things that could kill, take people out, or that could genetically do stuff inside people. So it's terrifying. So for me, it's kind of, I think that's incredible kind of advances, and also scary kind of, if it's taken the wrong direction, it is a slippery slope, like David said. So yeah, and I don't know how much control and regulation we've got, in any countries really, because I think they'll still push things forward regardless of whether it's going in a kind of good direction or a not so great one. So yeah, it's interesting, fascinating, bit scary. So yeah.
Thank you. My next question is describe the concept of gene editing and its potential application in agriculture. Uh, Professor David Smith.
Uh, uh, you know, gene editing is like we were talking about with CRISPR, because with CRISPR, you're editing genes in a living organism, and plants are living uh, organisms. Uh, I, you know, I think as you look at this, you're going to have to understand that it will be implemented in many different ways in plants and in agriculture. You will see it being done at the seed level. You'll see it being done at different levels. And like I said, CRISPR is one of the areas where you're seeing it, and it's trying to do transgene free edited plants so that you can go in and even make changes to those based on the local conditions and areas things out there. So you asked about the process of it. What you typically do with it uh, is you look at your target that you want to do in agriculture, your plants, the environment, and you engineer a nuclei and bind it to the targeted DNA sequences that are in the plants. Um, and these do what's called a double strand break at the targeted site in the DNA strand. But then the plant's repair mechanisms, the things that Ali was talking about earlier, where our body doing things, the plant's doing things, they begin to use a couple of different repair mechanisms to fix these double strand breaks. And this results in a precision repair, or it could be a mutation, which is the bad side of it, the plants. But what this does is it enables significant advances in plant engineering. And scientists and engineers have successfully modified target genes and controlled their expansion in plants. And this has improved a lot of different traits of plants, their resiliency, crop resistant, things like I said before. And so you can see that's going, there are some, as we said, ethical concerns which are still there in each of the different areas, but you know, plant and humans and animals are just the ones there. But you know, if you look at this area, you're going to need to understand that the education and training for this is pretty advanced in today's day, because you are going to need the background in biology, genetics, biochemistry, and then you will see them also in areas like genetics. You'll see the agricultural degrees coming in. You'll see medicine degrees need to be there. There's going to need to be laboratory skills and laboratory setup, particularly in the developing worlds, where they will do things such as DNA extraction, PCR, and cell cultivation. And you got to be able to follow the protocols very exactly, or you're going to get mutations. And the mutations are where a lot of the ethical considerations are today, because you know the bioethics and the regulatory compliance is going to be there. The other place that you're going to see is this is technology and all the domains we've been talking about, Sharif, are going to push the requirements for bioinformatics and for bioinformatics data sets management and others. The databases, the LLMs on this are huge and are very necessary for us to be able to advance the science. But you know, we're going to see this not only in agriculture and food, not only in medicine and pharmaceuticals, but you're going to see biomanufacturing, you're going to see biocomputing become more mainstream as we're going forward. And while I'm talking, Sharif, I'm going to go ahead and answer a question I think you will ask me. And that really is what is the role these can play in developing nations? Because you tend to give that one to me often. And it is a critical role in shaping the future. You know, one of the places you're going to see is these technologies are going to be excellent drivers of economic growth. And by developing the biotechnology sectors, is going to create new jobs and support sustainable development. One of the very exciting things in this area for developing countries is it will allow the countries to adopt these bioengineered, these genetically engineered technologies to address their country's own specific environmental and society needs. And this biotechnology in healthcare can improve public health, particularly through personalized medicine, diagnosis, and disease management. And the biotech can enhance crop yields, nutrition quality, and resistance to the localized pest and climate change. So, tremendous opportunities for this technology in developing countries. And the challenges are, as I mentioned a while ago, education. You have to have fairly advanced uh, education and access to laboratories for it. There's a regulatory framework there. Many of the large countries have a regulatory framework for beginning to deal with this. Many of the smaller countries do not. Access to capital. And government can ease the investment costs, as we see in many places, through grants and partnerships. I spoke about the infrastructure. Yeah, government can help a lot with infrastructure. In developing this advanced infrastructure in a developing country, these same tools can be used in a wide range of other areas in sciences and technology beyond just the genetics and the biotechnology. And we're seeing them happen. For example, in Africa, countries like Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, Ethiopia have embraced GMO crops such as cotton, corn, and soybeans. And they are using it to dramatically increase the growth there. Uh, India is a significant producer of genetically modified cotton and is beginning to use that pretty widely. So, Sharif, I hope that begins to address your question there and
Yeah,
also
sure.
begins to get into the impact for developing nations.
Yeah, sure. Madam Alira, discuss the concept of gene therapy and how does it work.
Tell me again, sorry, I didn't hear.
Uh, the concept of discuss the concept of gene therapy and its
Gene.
potential to treat genetics disorder.
Okay. Because I think that is one of the interesting things, and obviously if you've got a specific disease and they can customize some kind of therapy that either alleviates the symptoms or even cure, it's incredible. So I think and so I just think it's one of those things, I think it's going to happen anyway, but I think and I also think in the research that I did, it comes at a cost, and I think the thing is that you have to be financially quite well off to access that kind of process, unless, because I think the NHS over here is pushed to its limits really. So I think, and it is very postcode dependent on whether you're even, if you need certain drugs, you need to be in a certain postcode to access them, and you can be in some places and not have access to something that costs a fortune, and other places, that there. So I think the thing is that access and finance is always going to be critical. So, but it's incredible that that they're pushing forward. But I still think that there's really degenerative diseases that they, so one of my brother-in-law's mum has got motor neuron disease, and I still think that there isn't anything that's really alleviating that, and the prognosis and the future is quite scary, and I think there's other things. Dementia is one of the things that massively affects people in the UK, and I still don't think they've got on top of that. So and I think that has massive impact on families and care as well. So they have to either care for their relatives themselves. But I think it's kind of almost like losing the person before you lose the person. And I still don't think they know what the kind of root causes either. So I think we've still got a long way to go, and obviously the genetic information is the thing that is kind of the key to unlock, really. So yeah, it's I think they're making massive progress, but there's a long way to go to get on top of everything.
Yeah. Thank you. My next questions to Professor David Smith. What are some emerging trends and advancement in biotechnology and genetic engineering that have the potential to revolutionize various industries?
Well, Sharif, that's part of what we've been really talking about most of the day is where it can be used in that. The the future trends are just where we want to do anything with a living organism, where we can look at it and begin to do. Do we want? We're going to see this used a lot more in sustainable practices. We're going to see it used a whole lot more as we begin to look at the future of computing, the future of medicine, and there, let me, you know, the the biggest trend is though in synthetic biology, in regenerative medicine, in precision medicine, in agriculture, and beginning to use genetics as a form of a manufacturing tool. And we're going to see it used tremendously more in things like digitization, particularly as we look at how to advance artificial intelligence from where we are to AGI, because the use of genetically based analysis tools, you've heard of neural networks and things. We're going to see this type of technology dramatically advance what we can do in computing, what we can do in digitalization, how we can work across the advanced forms of data science and be able to apply them as we do this. We're at the, like I said before, the very beginning of a really exciting time where biology, material science, the human and animal biological structure, and um, all of these will become more and more closely connected as we understand that. You see, for example, Elon Musk with one of his companies here in Austin in the United States with doing the neural implants to help stimulate parts of the brain to solve dramatically bad diseases. And we're going to be seeing that done more and more with genetic engineering down the future as we get a deeper understanding of what is the art of the possible. And to me, that is one of the big things as we look at biotechnology and genetic engineering is what is the art of the possible and what is also the places where we should not extend that art of the possible into. And that's where the uh, ethical considerations are come into play. And that is where you're going to see the really hard uh, decisions have to be made.
Thank you, Madam Aliras. What's your closing remarks for today?
Okay, also I think regardless of my thoughts or anyone else's, that bioengineering and ge- um, genetic engineering's here to stay, and it's gonna be pushed forward. And I just think for me the ethical questions need to be answered, and the regulations, so that there's limits to what can happen, that are negative, so that kind of we get the best out of the technology, and try and avoid the worst and the consequences of what. So I think it's always about being conscious about the implications of whatever we do. So yeah, so that kind of level of consciousness is really important to me.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, I truly appreciate everything Ali has said with this, and I think we do a good job of balancing each other at times, and that it will help us as your listeners understand there's a wide diversity of areas on this one. Uh, Biotechnology is an area that we've actually have been practicing forms of biotechnology for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years as we look at how we can modify crops and do other things like that from the things, putting different areas of different types of corn together and hoping that they will cross pollinate to create a better corn is a type of biotechnology that has been done hundreds of years ago. So we've been using this for a long time. Genetic engineering is the newest thing on the block, and genetic engineering has tremendous promise, but tremendous challenges as you look at it and the ethical considerations of it and the moral considerations of some of the genetic engineering. But it also has the promise to solve hundreds of diseases that are life-threatening or debilitating to people. And so it's here, and we just need to move forward. The same thing I said before, though, Dr. Shree, biotechnology, genetic engineering is a global approach, and it will need to be adapted for local countries and things. So the opportunities for science and research globally, the opportunities for entrepreneurship, and the opportunities for developing nations to get into this and use the parts that are correct for their own countries are just tremendous.
Thank you. Thank you. This is excellent discussions. And tomorrow we have a very important show with Tando. Professor David Smith, actually a fellow of the Tando, and we have discussions on the future of universities. So hopefully it will be very interesting, and Professor David Smith and other Tando fellow will join in these discussions. Thank you, Madam Ali Rice, and thank you, Professor David
Yeah.
Smith, for joining today's sessions. Thank you. Bye bye, and take care.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care. Bye.